What might you have to present to me? Have you taken a moment to observe yourself and then glance at me? It seems that you have not. Is there a mirror in your home? Regardless, you are merely a lost spirit, and I exist in a realm far beyond your grasp. In a splendid realm called Enzo, there lived a young maiden named Ini. Ini was not merely beautiful, she possessed a breathtaking allure that appeared to illuminate the entire kingdom. In Enzo, she was a figure of fascination. Wherever she appeared, onlookers would pause their activities, captivated by her elegant stride and the brilliance of her smile. Her beauty was renowned, with stories of her allure traveling across vast lands, reaching even the remote villages beyond the kingdom's frontiers. Every man in Enzo longed to win her affection, yearning for the chance to call her his beloved wife. Her parents were affluent landowners, who lavishly adorned her with exquisite garments and stunning jewelry, ensuring she always resembled royalty. The villagers demonstrated how it enhances each day due to her remarkable beauty. Slowly, this admiration began to alter her perception of herself and those around her. Ini started to think of herself as not just the most beautiful girl in the village, but also superior to everyone else. She regarded herself as far above the other young women, opting to withdraw from their company and embrace solitude instead. Her only companion was her boyfriend, Ugana. They've shared a friendship that has stood the test of time, with him consistently putting up with her over-the-top behavior, despite her rudeness towards others. Ini's demeanor was one of arrogance, and she seized every opportunity to highlight how she eclipsed the other maidens. Her pride swelled to such an extent that it began to wound those in her vicinity, forging a divide between her and the other girls in the village. One day, an event unfolded that the village would hold in their memories for years to come. By the village stream, a common spot for gathering water and exchanging words, Ini found herself embroiled in a fierce dispute with another maiden, Ozan, over who would take the lead in fetching water. Ozan, being older than many of the maidens, was recognized for her kind heart. However, in contrast to Ini, she remained unmarried, with no suitors approaching to seek her hand in marriage. As the dispute intensified, Ini unleashed harsh words that pierced profoundly. She expressed to Ozan that her absence of admirers stemmed from her perceived unattractiveness and lack of charm. In her own world, Ini was the object of admiration for the village men, who relentlessly pursued her attention, leaving her with no moments of peace. "I'm not on your level, so the next time you wish to speak to me, you better clean up your language," Ini declared with an air of superiority, while tears started to flow down Ozan's cheeks. This event by the stream vividly illustrated how Ini's allure had obscured her discernment and compassion, leading her to condescend to someone already grappling with difficulties. Young men frequently approached her on the village road, eager to capture her affection with sweet words and little tokens of their admiration. Instead of responding with kindness or a polite refusal, Ini would brusquely dismiss their advances, delivering sharp insults that made it evident she was beyond their reach and far superior to any of them. This behavior profoundly hurt the young men's emotions. Rather than cherishing her, they began to develop a deep aversion to Ini. Her biting remarks transformed their admiration into bitterness, and they started to perceive her not as the enchanting maiden of the village, but as an individual marked by excessive pride and unkindness. The village elders, who cherished her and offered abundant praise, found themselves disheartened by Ini's actions. In the village, it was a customary practice to lend a hand to others, particularly the elderly who occasionally bore heavy burdens from one location to another. Young men and women were anticipated to extend their assistance, yet Ini consistently refrained from doing so. She completely ignored the elders as she walked through the village. She behaved as though she was far too significant to take a moment for this minor gesture of goodwill, convinced that her beauty alone warranted adoration from all. Her arrogance was so pronounced that she conducted herself as though she were a deity, elevated and superior to all others. Ini strode confidently, her head held high, seemingly oblivious to the traditions and respect that bound the community. This demeanor rendered her remote and frigid, distancing her from those who had previously appreciated her allure. As time went on, stories of Ini's disagreeable actions circulated through the village of Enzo with remarkable speed. Wherever she appeared, murmurs of her impoliteness and haughtiness followed her. They expressed their dissatisfaction and discontent, shaking their heads at the way she mistreated those around her. At times, Innie would overhear fragments of these discussions. Nevertheless, she appeared completely indifferent to their words. She felt entirely independent, convinced that she required no one else. Ultimately, her family enjoyed affluence, and she was in a relationship with someone who cherished and revered her in precisely the manner she expected. Meanwhile, the young men whom she had insulted and harshly dismissed harbored a profound bitterness within them. They experienced a deep sense of humiliation and anger, unable to shake off the memory of how Innie had diminished their stature. They watched her intently, hoping for an opportunity to convey the depth of hurt her cruel words had inflicted. They aimed to impart a lesson on respect and kindness, qualities she appeared to have overlooked in the midst of her many privileges. On a bright, sunny afternoon, Innie strolled back from the stream when a charming young man named Chidi came up to her. He had caught wind of whispers regarding Innie's brusqueness, yet he hadn't fully understood the extent of her unpleasantness. Filled with bravery, he paused to convey his admiration for her. He expressed to her the beauty he saw in her, and with a hint of shyness, revealed his desire to be more than just friends. As he spoke, Innie scrutinized him from head to toe with a discerning gaze. She let out a derisive laugh and remarked, "Just look at you. What might you have to present to me? Have you taken a moment to observe yourself and then glance at me? It's evident that you have not. Is there a mirror anywhere in your home? Regardless, you are merely a lost spirit, and I exist in a realm far beyond your grasp. Seek out someone who matches your own standards, and if I may offer a suggestion, consider mingling with the less refined individuals in the area. I prefer not to associate with those who are impoverished like yourself." "Can you believe the absurdity?" she remarked, waving her hand dismissively as she concluded her scathing outburst. Chidi remained frozen, overwhelmed and at a loss for words. He had never encountered such harsh words directed at him, particularly for merely sharing his feelings of love and admiration. He glanced at himself, pondering whether there was something off about his appearance. With a profound sense of sorrow, he turned and walked away, feeling deeply hurt and silently promising himself that Innie's cruel words would not go unchallenged. He would impart a harsh lesson that would remain etched in her memory forever. What Innie overlooked was that with every harsh word, she was creating a growing list of adversaries. Her contemptuous demeanor was not merely a passing instance of incivility, it was molding the perception of the entire village towards her. As twilight descended and the sun sank beneath the horizon, the village's young men convened around a sizable keg of palm wine. It was a unique moment to unwind, exchange tales, and reflect on the day's happenings beneath the refreshing canopy of a grand mango tree. The atmosphere was alive with laughter and warm conversation as they shared the wooden cup of wine, passing it from one hand to another. On a particular evening, Chidi, still feeling the sting of his recent interaction with Innie, chose to mention her name. As he narrated the moment when Innie had sharply rebuffed his compliments and labeled him as poor, the atmosphere thickened with tension. Every young man became increasingly focused, their typical smiles giving way to solemn expressions. It became evident that numerous individuals had encountered comparable insults from Innie. One by one, they started to recount their experiences of how Innie had dismissively turned them away or made them feel small. As they continued to share, the clarity deepened. Her words left them all profoundly wounded and distressed. As the palm wine kept pouring, so did their frustrations. As the stories of Innie's hubris and disregard unfolded, the bitterness deepened. The atmosphere was heavy with their collective dissatisfaction, and they all exchanged knowing glances, acknowledging that action was necessary. At long last, they united their thoughts and began to generate ideas. They explored different methods to help Innie understand the consequences of her actions and to impart a harsh lesson that would stay with her forever. The conversation was intense, with each person offering their thoughts and recommendations. Recognizing the necessity for united action to tackle the issue, they devised a strategy. By the evening's conclusion, bound by their shared experiences, they sensed a fresh connection among themselves, prepared to confront challenges and claim what was rightfully theirs. Among these men, Innie's boyfriend was absent, as the villagers regarded him as a weakling and preferred not to associate with him. Each Eek Day held a unique significance for the young girls in the village. They would don their finest attire and journey to the Eek market in Oyago, a village located quite a distance from their own. This day at the market was anything but ordinary. The event was alive with energy as young men and women from various nearby villages gathered in celebration. The centerpiece of the event was the maiden dance, a cherished tradition that infused the community with vibrant music, spirited shouts, and energetic movements. The young maidens found themselves swept up in an exhilarating experience. As the event transcended mere dancing, it was a setting where countless individuals discovered their future partners, with the dance frequently marking the start of enchanting romantic tales. Ini, celebrated in her village for her remarkable beauty, was also an adept dancer. She eagerly anticipated this day, relishing the way others observed her as she moved with elegance and expertise. Her performance captivated a large audience, garnering her significant admiration and acclaim. For Ini, dancing at the Eek market was a highlight, a moment when she felt genuinely valued and at the heart of everyone's focus, which she relished immensely. The path to the Eek market wound its way through a narrow, overgrown trail that snaked across the countryside. This hidden path, embraced by dense foliage and the gentle whisper of leaves, served as the sole passage to the lively energy of the market. Understanding the deep affection Ini held for these market days, the young men of the village, who resented her previous unkindness, recognized a chance to act. They knew that Ini always attended the Eek Day dance, and they selected this occasion as the ideal moment to put their scheme into action. They planned to confront her in a moment when she was distanced from the watchful gaze of her family and her boyfriend, aiming to impart the lessons that life had to offer her. With the arrival of a new week, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement and anticipation for yet another Eek Day. This week unfolded uniquely for certain individuals, particularly for the young men who had previously felt the sting of Ini's unforgiving remarks. They devised a scheme they believed would impart a lesson she would carry with her forever. In the stillness of dawn, while the village lay in slumber, these young men stealthily made their way along the narrow, overgrown path that wound towards the Eek market. The route was frequently traversed by the young women on Eek Day, meandering through the lush foliage and beneath the vigilant gaze of the towering trees. There, the men excavated a substantial pit alongside the road, meticulously concealing it with foliage and twigs to render it undetectable to the unwary passers-by. Subsequently, 2 of the young men concealed themselves within the foliage adjacent to the pit. They stood in quiet anticipation, eager for the instant when Ini would stroll by, ready to send her tumbling into the pit. Throughout the years, Ini had developed a routine of keeping herself apart from the other maidens during these strolls. She either walked confidently forward, reveling in her own significance, or hung back, too proud to associate with those she deemed inferior. Her actions rendered her an ideal target for the young men's scheme, as she frequently traversed the path by herself. On that fateful day of the Eek market, all unfolded precisely as the young man had envisioned. In keeping with her familiar routine, she opted to stroll by herself, distanced from the cluster of giggling and conversing young women. The solitude of her journey allowed the concealed young men to observe her advance without raising any alarms. As she approached the pit, the atmosphere thickened with the unspoken anxiety of the concealed figures. They stood poised to execute their scheme. She walked purposefully along the path to the Eek market, lost in her own reflections and oblivious to the world around her. The moment she had been unwittingly drawing near had finally come. As she approached the meticulously concealed pit, 2 men suddenly emerged from the underbrush, scattering leaves and twigs in their wake. Before she could process the situation or grasp the unfolding events, they propelled her quickly into the abyss. The abruptness of her actions caught the group of girls trailing behind her off guard. The entire scene unfolded before their eyes. The men leaped out, Ini rolling into the pit, and then the silence that ensued. Overwhelmed with fear and uncertainty about the identity of the men, and the possibility of being targeted next, the girls hurried past, leaving Ini behind without assistance. In that moment, their instincts took over, propelling them to sprint with all their might towards the refuge of the bustling Eek market. Their hearts raced as they pressed forward, not daring to glance back, leaving Ini to confront her situation on her own. Meanwhile, Ini discovered herself at the pit's bottom, the earth, softening her descent, yet her pride was left profoundly rattled. She began to cry out for assistance, her voice reverberating off the earthen walls of the pit. In the midst of her desperate pleas, silence enveloped her, and no one appeared to offer help. Innie cried out and cried out until her voice became raspy and she could cry out no longer. The path to the Eek market often lay empty, save for the bustling market days, leaving her ensnared and solitary in the pit. Understanding that no one would come to her aid in the daylight, Innie resolved to save her strength and bide her time, until the maidens would once more tread by on their journey home. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Innie perked up at the distant sounds of laughter and conversation. The young women were returning from the marketplace. Brimming with a fresh wave of optimism, she began to call out for assistance with all her might. As the girls approached and caught sight of who was in the pit, their expressions shifted dramatically. One by one they drew near the brink, let their disdain fall into the abyss, and turned away, abandoning Innie to her sorrow. They murmured quietly, suggesting that Innie was finally experiencing the consequences of her own actions. Ultimately, she had consistently regarded everyone as though they were inferior to her. And now, in her time of greatest need, she found herself alone, with no one willing to lend a hand. This harsh truth hit Innie deeply as the final girl walked past, leaving no gesture of support. She realized that her pride and arrogance had led to the loss of her friends, and the respect of those around her. As she sat in the pit, tears flowed down her cheeks, a profound sense of regret for her past actions enveloping her. As darkness draped itself over the village, the absence of Innie grew increasingly apparent. Her parents, consumed by anxiety, launched a desperate quest. They moved from one home to another, inquiring if anyone had caught sight of Innie. However, the replies lacked enthusiasm. The village's frosty response mirrored the way Innie had engaged with them. It felt as though her absence went unnoticed by everyone around her. Only her skeptical parents and her loyal boyfriend, who hurried through the village and along the routes to the market without assistance from anyone else, were aware of her situation. The young maidens who witnessed Innie tumble into the pit held their tongues, their fury and bitterness running so deep that they silently wished for her absence, yearning for the day when her cruelty would no longer shadow their lives. After a long, unproductive night of searching, Innie's parents came back home, their hearts weighed down and their hopes fading. The village lay in silence, unmoved by the struggles of a girl who had once believed she held dominion over them all. Throughout the night, Innie's parents writhed in their restless slumber, unable to grasp a moment of peace. Concern weighed heavily on their minds for their daughter, who had ventured out to dance at the market and had not come back. In the stillness of the night, a harsh truth began to dawn upon them. The whole village detested the portrayal of their family, especially Innie. The quiet and apathy from those around them pressed down on their hearts, and they lamented not having steered Innie towards greater kindness and humility. They had never imagined that their daughter's actions could result in such grave outcomes. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Innie's parents made a heavy-hearted decision. They would continue their search, resolute in their quest to find their daughter, whether she was alive or gone. With sorrowful hearts, they parted ways, each choosing a distinct path through the village and its outskirts, clinging to the faint hope of discovering any sign of Innie. As time dragged on, Innie found herself still ensnared in the hole, now marking the beginning of her third day. The early rush of panic and adrenaline had dissipated, leaving her feeling drained and feeble. With no food or water, each passing hour drained her strength a little more. Her voice was raspy from the shouts, and now she struggled to find the strength to call out. Reclining in the frigid, moist soil, Innie felt hope slipping away gradually. Despair enveloped her as she understood that her very existence hinged on an extraordinary turn of fate. She dreaded that without help, her time would soon run out. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Innie's mom sat tiredly in front of their house, her thoughts swirling after a long and unproductive morning spent searching for her daughter. Weary and downcast, she unexpectedly experienced a flicker of creativity. Even in the uncertainty of Innie's whereabouts, she chose to trust her innate sense of motherhood. She considered that perhaps, just perhaps, if she traversed the route to the AK as she sings in the market, there's a chance that Innie might hear her and respond in some way. It was a gamble, yet her desperation drove her to seek any trace of her daughter. Taking a resolute breath, Innie's mum rose to her feet, shook off the dust from her attire and made her way down the overgrown path that wound towards the market. Her voice floated gently yet resolutely through the atmosphere. She poured her heart into one of Innie's favorite songs, yearning for it to touch her daughter's ear. In that moment, frail and teetering on the edge of awareness in the depths, Innie caught the faint strains of a familiar melody wafting through the atmosphere. It was her mother's voice, a sound that ignited a spark of vitality within her. Struggling to find her voice, Innie could only muster a faint moan, pouring every last bit of her dwindling strength into that fragile sound. Back on the path, Innie's mum halted in her tracks. A soft whisper drifted into her hearing. A faint, almost imperceptible moan lingered in the air, elusive and untraceable, its source shrouded in mystery due to its soft volume. Her heart raced with trepidation. "Could it be my daughter?" she murmured softly to herself. Setting aside her uncertainties, she pressed on with her song, her voice quivering with deep feeling. As she trailed the sound, she then caught the echo of footsteps. With a quiver of uncertainty, she spun around to see Ego, the girl Innie had disparaged by the river for her unmarried status, racing towards her. She was breathless after sprinting all the way from her home. The girls in the village had made a pact to conceal Innie's location, yet she found the weight of this secrecy unbearable. Since the last Eek market day, she had been plagued by nightmares, and found herself unable to sleep. She informed Innie's mother that she was aware of Innie's whereabouts and led her to the pits. She quietly returned to the village, hoping to avoid the other girls who might label her a snitch. As she neared the pits, a wave of dread and anticipation washed over her, solidifying her worst fears and greatest hopes when she spotted her daughter at the bottom, delicate and teetering on the edge of collapse. Tears flowed down her cheeks as she called out to her daughter, engulfed by a mix of relief and sorrow at the sight of fragile and weakened Innie. Understanding that she was unable to save Innie alone, she rushed back home, her heart racing with a sense of urgency. She and her husband endeavored to find a method to elevate Innie from the depths, yet their strength fell short. In a moment of urgency, they reached out to Innie's boyfriend, praying he possessed the resources to aid in her rescue. As they lingered in anticipation of his arrival, they hoped fervently that he could rescue Innie from the brink of despair. Upon arriving at the scene, Innie's boyfriend, Ugana, swiftly evaluated the circumstances and suggested a course of action. He proposed locating a strong rope, tossing it into the pits, and gripping it tightly while Innie attempted to ascend with the rope as assistance. Yet, as they implemented this plan, it soon became clear that it was not going to succeed. Innie felt utterly drained, her arms limp and her hands struggling to hold on to the rope. Every effort to lift herself up fell short, leaving her more exhausted and her family growing more anxious. As they lingered by the pits, enveloped in a sense of helplessness and uncertainty about their next move, Ugana was suddenly inspired by a new idea. This time, he suggested securing one end of the rope to a nearby tree for added stability. He would then descend into the pits, the other end firmly fastened around him. Once he was down, he intended to hoist Innie onto his back and ascend without her clinging to him. Thrilled by this fresh strategy, they swiftly set it in motion. Ugana fastened the rope with precision, checked its strength for safety, and then cautiously lowered herself into the depths of the pits. In the cool, dim depths, he carefully hoisted Innie onto his back, ensuring she was firmly settled. Taking a deep breath, he started to ascend, buoyed by the rope and his unwavering resolve. The strategy was successful. Ugana climbed out of the depths, carrying Innie on his back, both of them cloaked in grime, yet feeling a sense of relief to escape the shadowy abyss. Innie was remarkably frail and struggled to maintain her grip, yet her parents were filled with joy at the sight of her safety. They hurriedly brought her to the village healer, renowned for his expertise in herbs and remedies. He carefully assessed Innie and provided her with a concoction derived from local flora, intended to rejuvenate her vitality and well-being. In the days that followed, with her family and the medicine man keeping a vigilant eye, Innie slowly started to regain her strength. Her strength returned gradually, and with it, her spirit blossomed, filled with gratitude for the renewed opportunity to embrace life. Following her challenging experience, Innie discovered a crucial lesson that transformed her life permanently. Alone and vulnerable in the depths, she found herself reflecting on her past interactions with others. She came to understand that her allure and her talent for dance held little value when she found herself in distress and in need of assistance. Her behavior towards the villagers, marked by arrogance and disrespect, led them to turn their backs on her in her time of greatest need. As Innie healed, enveloped by her loved ones and filled with gratitude for the healer's assistance, she started to recognize the importance of compassion and positive actions. She recognized that humility, respect, and kindness held far greater significance than the admiration garnered from her appearance or abilities. Ini vowed to transform her habits. She resolved to stop looking down on others and to treat them with kindness. Rather, she would embody a spirit of respect for all, regardless of their status or appearance. Her mother recounted the tale of how ego had played a crucial role in preserving her life. Ini was astonished that despite all the harsh words she had directed at ego, she still found it in her heart to save her life. As she approached Ego's house, tears flowed freely down her cheeks. She carried a gift, a token of gratitude and a plea for forgiveness for the painful words she had spoken. Ini began to reconnect with those she had distanced herself from. Extending warm words and a supportive gesture, she discovered the art of listening and sharing, and gradually she started to forge friendships. She started acknowledging the elders she encountered on her way down the road. The villagers observed the transformation in her demeanor, and began to greet her with smiles and warm hellos whenever they crossed paths. Ini felt a warmth in her heart that she had never experienced before, and she recognized that this feeling of connection and community was the true beauty of life. She appreciated the challenging lesson as it had shown her the way to become a better individual. Indeed, one solitary tree cannot create a forest. Our interconnectedness is essential for survival. Ini's journey imparted a lesson of great worth. Beauty is a remarkable quality, yet without strong character, it diminishes in worth. From her experiences, she discovered that true beauty is reflected in the way you treat others and in your actions when no one is observing. Once she grasped this, Ini evolved into a significantly improved individual. She started to embrace kindness and respect towards everyone, understanding that these traits illuminated her true beauty. Her tale emerged as a compelling testament in the village, illustrating that true essence lies in character, transcending any superficial facade. She dedicated her life to sharing this experience with young girls. Hello friends, I appreciate you taking the time to watch this story. I hope it brought you enjoyment and valuable insights. I've shared my lesson, and I invite you to share yours in the comments below. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please don't skip this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you can be alerted whenever we share new stories. I want to express my deep appreciation for your unwavering support. I truly value each and every one of you and never take your presence for granted. I appreciate your support, and I look forward to sharing my next tale with you. Farewell.